Hello, everyone. On behalf of iland and Tag Solutions, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation, How to Become IT Resilient with Cloud-Based Disaster Recovery. My name is Will Urban. Over the next hour, we're going to do just some presentation talking a little bit about disaster recovery, introduce some of the Tag Solution offerings and stuff. A little bit of housekeeping. This is being recorded, so if you aren't able to see the whole thing or you want to catch it later or give it to a colleague, it will be available on the Tag Solutions blog later on. And then, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions and answers box. And as we have time, we'll go ahead and get to that. And if we don't have time to get to all the questions, we'll go ahead and reach out to everyone afterwards. So with that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about a recap of what we talked about last time around backup strategies and some of the things that you can do around that situation. Talk a little bit about the current disaster recovery challenges, talk about IT resilience strategies, and then really how you can take that from the data center to the cloud. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dave. Dave, thank you for having us with you on talking about the Tag Solution and iland partnership. Would you like to talk a little bit about Tag Solutions for everyone on the phone?
Yeah, I would. So first of all, thanks for everybody for joining the webinars. My name's Dave Venner. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing, and I'm joined by my colleague, Andrea Madden, who is our marketing specialist here at Tag Solutions. I think most of the people on the call are familiar with us, but at Tag, we do three things. Managed services, which is essentially outsourced IT, cybersecurity, and unified communications, which has everything to do with phone systems. What I think makes us unique and different from other managed service providers is our proactive approach and our strategic approach as it relates to managed services. All of our managed services clients are taken through a process where there's a 500-point inspection of every endpoint, every system that they have, and they're all assigned with a virtual CIO to make sure that technology is aligned with business goals. Enough about us. I'm really excited about this topic. Frankly, I think this is probably one of the most important, if not the most important topic there is. Today we're going to talk about making sure your business can operate in the event of a failure or a natural disaster. If you look at what's happening on the West Coast, and frankly, unfortunately, a lot of coasts at this point, there's a lot going on. And without a disaster recovery plan, businesses can be unable to operate, right? So if these folks didn't have disaster recovery plans, they'd be dead in the water. This is the type of thing where you don't think you need to worry about it until you do. And we're really excited, as I mentioned, about this partnership with iland, where we're focused mainly on data protection and disaster recovery. So Will, I will kick it over to you to get started.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, we're really excited about not only the partnership, but also being able to protect the customer business and to power their innovation, especially moving forward in these challenging times. So just a real quick cap. So last time we all got together and we talked about data protection when it comes to like backup and cloud-based backup and stuff like that. If you weren't able to join us last time, that information is available on the Tag Solutions blog, and you can reach out to them to get a little bit more information about it. So I'm only going to go through it real briefly because then we really want to talk about IT resilience and disaster recovery. But we talked about the 3-2-1 rule of data availability, where you really need to have 3 copies of your data, at least 2 different media types, even for local backup, and especially 1 offsite air-gapped copy somewhere else in case of any sort of ransomware or disaster or power outage or who knows what. You need to have that availability to quickly recover. And by leveraging the Tag Solutions and iland partnership, you have full access to a full suite of information, everything from secure cloud backup, object storage and capacity tiers. Disaster recovery is what we're going to be talking about. And then also, as more and more organizations are leveraging Office 365, or now they renamed it Microsoft 365, for collaboration and email and Exchange and SharePoint and Teams and all that stuff, there's actually a very large gap in understanding what's being protected by Microsoft and what needs to be protected by the customer. And so we have more information about that if you want to find out more information around where the gaps are and how you can leverage the Tag solution to protect your Microsoft 365 information as well in the case of malicious ransomware, accidental deletion, long-term policy archivals, and stuff like that. Now, we talked last time really about data protection from a backup perspective. But honestly, backups are not enough. I mean, you have to have them, whether it's for legal and compliance, whether it's for regulatory, whether it's for long-term archival. just accidental deletion, policies, whatever. You have to have backups. But true IT resilience, like Dave just talked about, really lies in the ability to quickly recover your organization. If the entire California coast is on fire, it doesn't matter how good your backup is if you can't get to the data center or the data center has no power. It doesn't matter if your backups are in great condition when the power outage caused from a flood from a hurricane is destroying your entire infrastructure, right? So backups by themselves are not enough. And it really requires kind of a multi-layered data protection. Now, when we, obviously this is all kind of common knowledge. We all know this, right? We see it every single day. And, you can't not look at the news and not look at the stuff that you see and realize that there are so many different things that are happening in the world of cyber, right? And, a lot of times disaster recovery has always had this kind of nomenclature of, well, a meteor's not going to strike my data center, so I don't really need it. And honestly, that's the last thing we're really talking about. We're talking about ransomware. We're talking about malicious. We're talking about power outages. We're talking about hurricanes. We're talking about accidental, deletion of virtual machines or deletion of objects, natural fires and earthquakes and all kinds of stuff long before we're actually talking about, the quote unquote, the traditional meteor hitting my data center sort of thing, right? So disaster recovery has always kind of been one of those things that's people always know it. They know they need it, but it's always been one of those things where they said, well, chances are it's not going to happen. So it's too expensive. I'm not going to go through doing it. And you can't go a single day without it being kind of a slow day in IT, right? And for forever, IT has been challenged with resiliency and keeping the lights on and making sure applications are responsive and all that stuff. And now over the last 9 months, we have things like COVID and global pandemics and the ability to not go into work and wildfires. And IT is struggling, and they're to be commended with how they were able to respond. But sometimes, the response has been a little bit lacking in the form of technical debt, right? So you're able to quickly enable your organization to work from home and be remote. But what happens if something penetrates your network, or what happens if you can't get to your data center for whatever reason, right? So there's so many different things that are going on in today's world that make it so that you need to have IT resilience. You need to be able to continue your business no matter what happens, whether it's, global pandemic, whether it's malicious software, whether it's just a hurricane coming in and flooding the waters, right? Now, it's not all doom and gloom, right? So 96% of companies with a trusted backup and disaster recovery plan were able to survive ransomware attacks. And that's a really powerful statement. When you think about how many companies you've seen in the news lately around ransomware and $1 million, settlements for insurance companies, and what that does to a company as far as like reputation. We'll talk about some of that stuff. That's some scary stuff. And so by invoking a good data protection and backup plan, and especially working with tag solutions to kind of create an overarching protection system. So, we do an entire seminar talking about how data protection means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Data protection to a networking person might mean firewalls. Data protection to an application administrator might mean malware protection. Data protection to someone like me means backups and recovery, right? And so tag solutions can help you understand where your gaps are and how you can create a complete comprehensive data protection plan that includes everything from your endpoints all the way to your disaster recovery plan. And that's what you need. There's no one single solution, but you need that entire thing to protect your organization. And you all know this, but your data is your lifeblood and it has to be protected. There are so many different things that happen. Service availability. Again, if the power's out to the building because there's a flood, it doesn't matter how good, you could have, 10 nines of availability on your SAN, but there's no power to the data center, or there's no internet connection. Accidental deletion still today causes untold amounts of cost and burden on IT. I mean, any IT person in the world will know, yes, I've had to restore something that was accidentally deleted, or I accidentally deleted the wrong virtual machine, or I ran a script and I automatically deleted 400 different things and now I need to recover them. Accidental deletion is probably still one of the most leading causes of some sort of data recovery event. External and internal threats such as ransomware and malicious insiders. And it's funny, we talk about malicious insiders and a lot of people are like, well, I trust my users, but a malicious insider isn't always an employee. But what it could be is it could be a threat acting as an employee. One of the things we talk about, especially over the last couple of months, is we're all working from home. I've got 2 kids of my own and they're trying to do school, and I've got dogs and I've got craziness going on. And, at night, it's 10 o'clock at night and I can finally sit down. I can sit on the couch. I open up my laptop. I've got Facebook up. I've got my VPN to my corporate network up. I've got email. I've got a whole bunch of projects. All it takes is one misclick, and now somebody has my credentials to my environment and can cause all sorts of untold damage, right? So a malicious insider isn't necessarily a bad apple in your organization, but it could potentially be someone posing as that. And so you have to be aware of that, and you have to have a way to recover and to protect against that. Policy gaps, long-term archival, and regulatory needs and things like that, those are always important. Is it medical, is it HIPAA, is it PCI? What are you doing for long-term protection of your data? And then of course legal and compliance and the regulations and the audits. Whether you're regulated or not, you may still have your own sort of regulatory attestations and certifications you abide by, whether it's ISO 27001 or if it's HIPAA or PCI or whatever. So everyone knows this. You have to protect your data. And there are so many different things that can cause an outage, whether it's an hour, whether it's a day, whether it's a week, right? And you have to be prepared to deal with all of that stuff. And honestly, this stuff costs money, right? You can go through exercises all over the place to find out what the tangible cost of an outage is. If I don't have my website up and running, how many dollars am I losing per hour because of lost sales? How many employees do I have at X number of dollars per hour and they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs because they can't access their email, right? Those are kind of the basic, business continuity plan and cost of outages exercises that a lot of organizations have already done, and they can kind of see that. But what about the intangible costs of an outage? What about the perception of your customers or the people using your service if you are unable to meet their needs? You can't service their data, you can't serve up their website. Think about brand loyalty. They talk about how it's so much harder, it's 10 times or 7 times harder to reacquire somebody than it is to acquire them the first time. And then finally, confidence, both internal and external confidence in your solution, in your company, in your organization. Recently, the people that do Jack Daniels, they had a huge ransomware and data breach. And now I don't think the world is going to go out and stop, buying Jack Daniels whiskey. But at the same time, like, do you want your name to be in the news in that? And how does that impact the perception and the confidence and the loyalty of your customers, both internal and external, right? So these are the things you have to think about when you think about disaster recovery, IT resilience, business continuity, all of those things, because it really is more than just, hey, I make $100 an hour on my website, and if it's down, that's $100 I don't get. It's not worth doing DR, right? There's a lot more to it than just that. And again, I talked about this before about backups aren't enough. And what do you mean? Well, we have our backups, and that's fine. You have to have backups. But there's a lot of scenarios which backups are just not enough to continue running your organization. Backups are prone to unacceptable RPOs, or recovery point objective. So for those of you that don't know, an RPO, or recovery point objective, is how far back in time am I losing my data? And there's all kinds of things that you can find out. What happens if you're doing a backup at 9 o'clock at night, and then very next day at 8 o'clock, you lose the entire infrastructure? Well, now, think about it, you're 23 hours out of date. And then comes the backups have painful RTO, recovery time objectives. If you now have to recover that entire, infrastructure, and it takes another 10 hours, now you're looking at, 23 plus 10. So, 33, 35, 40 hours. So now, when you have those conversations and you say, yes, we have a backup every night, but it's going to take us 40 hours to recover, and we're going to be out of date by 40 some odd hours. Now, all of a sudden, it starts to put into your mind the perspective of where IT resilience really shines and comes in. Local backups can be targeted by malicious software. There's ransomware that will go out and find all of the map drives and destroy all of the local backups. And then where are you at? And then you have to restore something to, you have to have something to restore to. So again, if your data center is out of power, or you've got some sort of hardware failure and you have nothing to restore to because you're waiting on hardware, or there's a fire and you can't get to it, it doesn't matter how good your backups are. So IT resilience truly means both backups and disaster recovery. And now, unfortunately, disaster recovery has kind of had a bad name for many, many, many years. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and I have done some pretty crazy backup and DR stuff way back in the days. Disaster recovery for an entire data center can be complex. I mean, I've done everything from mirror drives and putting them in my car and driving them over to the next data center, to SAN-based replication, to application-based backups and recovery, and scripting and cron jobs. And also, I mean, it has been kind of a pain. And IT staff, they just don't have the time, right? I mean, especially now, you're trying to keep your organization up and running in a pandemic. The last thing you have is time to go to another data site, another data center, and try to figure out whether or not the DR plan is working. Replication and duplication could always be costly, whether you're doing SAN-based replication, whether you need a dark fiber between sites, what was the bandwidth consumption, all that stuff. And then testing was always a pain, right? You would, shut down your entire organization on a Friday, spend the long weekend working on your DR plan. You pull out these archaic, 3-ring binders and nothing would work. And, after 40 some odd hours of working nonstop, you realize that you hope that this never has to be invoked because it's just not going to work. And then you turn back on your production. So DR has had that stigma for a very long time. But thankfully, cloud, automation, virtualization, encapsulation, all of these things have kind of really come up to speed to enable organizations to really create a disaster recovery plan that makes it easy for them. Now, this is a pretty ham-fisted slide, and I know, and it's on purpose, but when you think about all the things you have to do for disaster recovery, you need another data center, you need power and cooling and racks and stacks and servers and cable and storage and security and connectivity and staff and the time to configure. And I know it's ham-fisted because I want to prove to the point that when you try to do this yourself, usually early on it fails, right? And so by leveraging disaster recovery as a service, by leveraging the cloud and automation and orchestration and virtualization and encapsulation and a cloud-based service provider like iland with Tag Solutions, you really overcome the whole left side and you really just focus on creating a disaster recovery plan. Now, before I start talking about technology, I've got VMware, so I need to encapsulate, and am I going to use Veeam? Am I going to use Zerto? What's my RTO? What's my RPO? What are my automation options? What are my scripting? What's the difference between a recovery plan and recovery group? Before all that stuff, let's talk a little bit about the business side. And I know Dave's going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the presentation, but before you can start talking about the technology, you need to have a very deep conversation with the business owners of all the applications about what it is you even have. What are you trying to accomplish? If you don't know what you have, you don't know how to protect it. And a lot of times when you have these conversations, when it comes from we need to protect SQL 07 and App 05 in order for us to continue making money, it doesn't make any sense. When you say the website's going to go down, or our finances are going to not work, that starts to make more sense. So you have the conversation with the business owners and the application owners about what it is you actually have. And then once you have kind of given an idea of what you have and audited everything, and you find out what you need to protect, then you start talking about priorities and SLAs. Every conversation I've ever had with every application owner ever has always been their application must be the very first thing to come on, otherwise the entire company is going to fail. And we all know that's not true, right? So there are certain applications, there are certain things inside your organization that need to have SLAs and priorities assigned to them. And you need to say, well, what is required for the business to continue running? If I encapsulate and make my dependencies isolated, then I can start to think, okay, this is what runs our manufacturing. This is what runs our marketing. This is what runs our sales. This is what runs our website. And then if something happens to one of those, I can quickly bring them up. And then how quickly do I need to bring them up? Those are the conversations you have to have. And then beyond that, you have to start thinking about notifications and alerts. I think nowadays we are so inundated with email and messages and logs and stuff like that nobody pays attention to any of it. I mean, you create a filter, it goes to your spam or whatever, and nobody pays any attention. And so you could be having an alert, a failed hard drive, smart drive alert for a week, and then finally it fails, and then now you're in some serious trouble. So how do you make the decision for an event? How do you make the decision to fail over one application group or the entire data center? How do you notify the right application owner so that they're ready and aware that they need to check their services? They need to check to make sure that everything comes online properly. Because a disaster event, a IT resilience event is not just an IT thing. It is a company-wide thing. If your data center goes down and you need to bring your organization up, it cannot just be IT. It has to be the owners of the applications. It has to be the business. It has to be everybody so that everyone's on board with what it needs to happen, right? And you have to have those conversations. And sometimes they're hard conversations, but they need to happen. And then you need to validate, you need to test, and you need to report on all of this stuff. How long ago was the last time you've done a backup recovery just to test it, right? I talk to people all the time and they're like, well, I haven't done a backup restore since the last time I needed to. I was like, well, when was that? Oh, about 9 months ago when so-and-so needed a file. Okay, well, how do you know that the last 9 months you've been getting successful backups? Same thing with IT resilience. You have to validate, you have to test it, and you need to report on it. And as more and more organizations are requiring, cyber insurance and cybersecurity insurance and policies, and their customers are coming to them and asking them what their disaster recovery plan is, you need to be able to prove that. You need to say, okay, we do a test every month. Here's our success, here's our failures, here's what we did to rectify. I'm applying for a cyber insurance policy for $10 million to protect my business. The cyber insurance company is going to say, have you done everything in your due diligence? Yes, I have. Here's all my reports. Those are things that are becoming mandatory in the field, and you have to kind of do that. And that's where cloud-based disaster recovery really makes your job easier, because disaster recovery as a service offered by Iland and Tag Solutions enables you to kind of do all of the things I'm talking about without going and buying a secondary data center. You don't have to worry about a secondary site or buying secondary amounts of equipment. Your IT resources aren't stretched any thinner because you're not worrying about creating double the IT data centers. A lot of times DR sort of falls flat when you go to finance and say, hey, I need to spend, $500,000 on equipment, but I also need another $500,000 of equipment just in case. That usually falls on its face and gets, rejected pretty quickly. And then a lot of times customers have said, oh, well, I'm just going to take my old stuff and throw it in my DR location. And the rebuttal to that is always, you're going to take your old stuff that's out of warranty, that's probably end of life anyhow, and that's what you're going to hope runs your organization in the case of a disaster. It just doesn't make sense. Cloud disaster recovery as a service is what's going to solve all that. Geographic redundancy. It does you no good if your data center is 2 blocks away when there is a wildfire or a flood or a natural disaster, a power outage, something like that. Also, when you're looking at geographic diversity and things like government regulations like GDPR or Australian RAP, like you have to worry about those kind of global regulatory issues if you're doing your disaster recovery. And so making sure that you have a global geographic redundancy for your operations is important. The ability to schedule testing without causing disruption. This is where virtualization and encapsulation has really kind of shined. So over the years, as virtualization has become mainstream and you've got your VMware environment, you can encapsulate your virtual machines and you can send them anywhere. And honestly, it's really not too hard to send a virtual machine anywhere in the world, right? That's not the hard part. Being able to schedule the testing and without causing a disruption, that's where it starts to get complicated. And then the last part of this, automation and reporting, that automation and orchestration is where it becomes really important, because if you have 10 virtual machines, you can easily power them on in any order you want. So you can go in and say, well, I'm going to power this guy on. I'm going to wait for this service to come up. I'm going to go ahead and attach. I'm going to do all this. But when you have 410 virtual machines and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and your entire business is down, the last thing you want to have to do is try to figure out which one of the 410 virtual machines comes on next, right? So you automate, you orchestrate, you test, and you audit, and that improves your confidence in your recovery. And the best part about it is if something fails during a test, great. Now you know what failed, fix it, and then rerun the test so you have full confidence that your solution is going to work. With Iland Solution, you have full access to expert support. So this is what we do all day, every day, all day long, right? So we have been doing disaster recovery for 12 some odd years. Our cloud service team is there to assist and help you understand what it is you're trying to do, and they can help you answer questions like, do I do my AD server, or do I create a new one? Or, how do I create, a layer 2 VPN between my two sites in case I want to do partial failover? That's what we're here for. That's what we do every single day. We can even help you in the event of a disaster, along with Tag Solutions, to actually invoke the whole thing. You're in your car and your boss calls you and says, hey, we're out. Make a couple calls, call up Tag, call up us. We can get you up and running, right? And while you do that, one of the most important things is to never lose visibility or management of your environment, right? And this is so key because as organizations are leveraging the cloud, they're turning to, cloud-based disaster recovery. The last thing you want to do is take all the things that you do on site, your policies, your procedures, your workflows, everything, and kind of throw them out the door. And so iland Secure Cloud Console brings a unified management platform for all of your cloud operations. Now, this can be managed by Tag, this can be managed by you. It's all depending on the relationship you have or the needs that you have. And Dave can talk a little bit more about that as well. But really, within the iland Secure Cloud Console, you have full visibility into your IT continuity plan or your IT resilience plan. So you have this concept of a recovery group, and a recovery group all goes back to that business discussion I talked about, where understanding what the business need is. What are your dependencies? What are the applications or virtual machines that have to be grouped together and have to come on at the same time and have to be consistent with each other? Those are recovery groups. Runbooks are basically the automation and orchestration of bringing that system and solution online. And the best thing about runbooks is you can create all kinds of runbooks. You can have runbooks for partial site failover. You can have runbooks for just my financials or just my website or just my manufacturing VMs or an entire site failover, all of that stuff. And then with the failover wizard, you can, with a couple of buttons, you can actually choose whether or not it's a full site failover, whether it's a test failover, what sort of runbooks I need, which sort of recovery groups I need to do. And then all of this comes with full reporting. So you can see the success criteria, you can see your SLA for replication, you can see when was the last test, you can see how much space it's consuming, how many times you've run it. All of that stuff can be reported on for auditing and that kind of stuff. Now, once you get into the cloud, right, you don't want to lose management and visibility of your environment. So within the iland Secure Cloud Console here on the left-hand side, you see all of your virtual machines, all of your applications, all of your gateways, all of your networking. And so from within the console, you can go and you can choose all of the things. You can choose your recovery groups. You can set up your runbooks. You can look at the RPOs and the RTOs of your actual virtual machines to find out if they're abiding by that stuff that you had the conversation with your business owners about. Like if they say, well, we need this to be up within, an hour and we can't lose more than 20 minutes of data, great. Put that in here, make sure it's meeting that, or, make and see what you can change and tweak and then report back on that. Creating a disaster recovery runbook is simple. You just go through the wizard and you're able to do all kinds of interesting things, choosing different recovery groups, different virtual machines, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm just kind of showing you a little bit about the console and some of the capabilities that it has. From the failover wizard, you can do full site failover, you can do partial failover, you can decide different points in time. So this one's really important because let's say you're infected with ransomware and you have points in time every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes or every hour. It may not do you any good to fail back to your current because your current is replicated in a corrupt state. So you go back 10 minutes, you go back 15 minutes before the ransomware hits, and then you're able to quickly recover your environment. So being able to have those checkpoints, those points in time is very important because it's not just the latest and greatest that's always the one that you have to go to. Then the reporting and auditing, like I talked about, is very, very important. Making sure that you have full reporting and visibility of how did my VMs come on. Again, when you're testing, this is the best time to see a failover or a failure because you can go in and say, oh, I forgot to replicate this dependency, or oh, this VM didn't work. Oh, I forgot to put I put the, the VNIC on the wrong VLAN or anything like that. So you have the ability to test it, find out what fails, and then continue to test it. And then as things change in your environment, you add new virtual machines, you do new things like that, you can add more to it. Once you are running in the cloud, you have full access and availability into changing everything from your networking. Like, networking is complex. We understand that. Being able to change your firewalls, change your edge gateways, change your DNS and your layer 2 VPNs, all of that stuff can be done within the Iland Secure Cloud Console. And then same thing with the virtual machines. All of the things that you do on site today with Virtual Center, the vCenter client, all of that stuff, being able to open the console, add a CD, change the properties, add more RAM, check on my performance, my disk latency, all of that stuff that you have to do your normal day job is still within the Iland Secure Cloud Console. Because remember, once you fail over, you don't know how long you're going to be running in the cloud. You may be there for 4 hours, you may be there for 4 weeks until whatever happens on site that caused the outage is resolved. So you need the same power, the same tools, and the same management that you had when you were doing this on site. And then because you've failed over into the cloud, the last thing you want to have to worry about is your data protection strategies. So just like you continue to have data protection and backup on site, when you move over to the cloud, the last thing you want to have happen is you run in the cloud for a couple of days and then something bad happens and now you have nothing. So when virtual machines come online in the Iland cloud, they're automatically attached to the backups, they're automatically backed up, and you can actually recover them. They're air-gapped offsite backups of those virtual machines that are in the cloud, and you can even do cloud-to-cloud site replication for an additional IT resilience level of security for you. And speaking of security, by leveraging the security suite, you don't have to worry about bringing your security solution with you. So everything from vulnerability scanning and malware and antivirus and all that stuff is built into the Iland Secure Cloud. So once again, as the virtual machines come online, as you're in a fire drill and you're trying to recover your organization, you don't want to have to worry about, oh, I need to upgrade my, Norton antivirus, or I need to make sure that I have, DDoS protection. All that stuff is taken care of, and it's part of the overall secure cloud. And then, of course, one of the biggest challenges with disaster recovery in the past has always been the billing part, right? Just understanding, well, how much is this costing me from a physical and a virtual and infrastructure and IT costs and everything like that. Within the Iland Secure Cloud, you can actually see the consumption for both showback and chargeback and understand exactly what your disaster recovery is costing you. And the benefit with cloud is you really only pay for what you use and consume versus going out and buying 3 years worth of hardware that just sits in a location with you hoping that you don't have to use it. Now, that's awesome, right? So let's say we're all on board, we're ready to do this. Well, where do we even start? I'm gonna talk a little bit with Dave in a second about how Tag Solutions can help you get started. But when you think about cloud, the first thing people always say, well, is, I don't know, how much do I need? And any cloud vendor will happily sell you whatever it is you want, but you wanna make sure you right size your environment. So the Iland Catalyst is a free analysis tool that can right size your environment from the start. You can quickly answer, how much do you need? How much space do you need in the cloud? How much actual space are you consuming? Not how much space is allocated, not, if you ask a DBA and he says, oh, I need 128 gigs of RAM, but then you find out you're only using 20 gigs of RAM, you don't want to purchase 128 gigs of cloud RAM because you're not going to use it all, right? So it allows you to really see how much consumption is actually being used. It also allows you to do bandwidth checking, check the connectivity and see how long it's going to take to seed your data, to actually get your information there. And then based on your daily change rates, what kind of RPOs and RTOs can you configure and keep up with. It allows you to truly right size your cloud solution, making sure that you have the right capacity, the right performance, so that when you do fail over, the last thing you want to have happen is it just not work, right? So right size your environment, don't overpay, get exactly what you need. And then the Iland Catalyst report can actually be used by engineers to help you with everything from understanding how your VPNs are going to work to understanding how your networking stack is going to work and your virtual machines. And, this virtual machine needs to have, XYZ attached and, all of that stuff. So this is just a very powerful tool to right size your environment. Now, cloud-based disaster recovery leads to cloud-based infrastructure. When you think about kind of where we're all moving, IT's main job is to deliver business value with innovations and IT, breakthroughs and all the cool things that IT can bring to the table. And a lot of times IT can kind of get hampered by some of the traditional IT. And so by leveraging cloud-based disaster recovery, you almost start to proceed with that cloud adoption and understanding what you can do in the cloud, understanding what solutions work in the cloud for you and which solutions still need to stay on-prem. And what it does is it really allows you to understand both from a testing and a performance perspective how the cloud can fit your innovation strategies and where you want to move from there. But that's for another time. And in fact, if you want, you can join us on October 27th as we discuss accelerating and simplifying your IT initiatives with cloud-based infrastructure from Tag Solutions and iland. So we're going to talk all about how you can leverage the iland Secure Cloud to do exactly that. Not only move from a disaster recovery perspective, but do site-to-site or cloud-to-cloud disaster recovery and IT resilience. Running application workloads in the cloud. How does that fit into your strategy? Now, before we kind of sum up, one of the challenges that a lot of organizations have is compliance and regulatory issues and things like that. So before we even, are able to implement disaster recovery, InfoSec comes in or the CISO comes in and says, hey, look, they don't have this. They don't meet these attestations or certifications, so we can't do this. But with iland, comprehensive compliance is what we do. So across the board, across the globe, we have so many attestations and certifications. And in fact, we even have a compliance and legal team on site that can help you and help the conversation between you and Tag Solutions to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and what regulatory, mandates you may have. Is it GDPR? Is it, Australian RAP? Is it ITIL? Is it, ITAR compliance? Like all of this stuff, so that you can have that confidence that the infrastructure that you're moving to has the attestations that you need. And in fact, iland is one of the only two global CSA star certification clouds in the world right now. There's just two of us. Now, a little bit more about iland. We've been doing this for a very long time, and we do just a couple of things really well. We do backup, we do disaster recovery, we do infrastructure. Delivering 25 years of IT services, over 12 years of cloud and disaster recovery expertise, 11 global data centers, so you can make sure that whatever your challenges are from a global perspective or a compliance perspective, we have. 100% financially backed guarantee, SLA, 98% support satisfaction. You're not waiting to talk to someone from an email. You're talking to someone on the phone, and we're very proud of that. And our plus 71 promoter score means that our customers are telling their friends and colleagues and coworkers about the solutions that we offer. And when it comes to disaster recovery as a solution, iland was named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant the last 4 years running because of all the things I showed you, because of the great partnership that we have, because the amazing things that we've done with our partner community, with our customers, with our solution, with our technology, with our automation and orchestration. All of that stuff has continued to impress analysts and customers across the globe. And it really shows you that we know what we're doing and we want to help you become successful in your IT resilience challenges. And then, we've gotten, more awards, just kind of tooting our horn a little bit, but, really understanding that we work with our channel partner community very closely. So we're super excited to work with Tag Solutions to help you understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and, go from there. And speaking of, Dave, I'd love for you to kind of jump in. So what next? What do the people here on the phone, what can they do next to find out more and to kind of get started with this?
Sure, thanks, Will. So today we're offering a free assessment for those who qualify. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to audit your current data protection and restorative procedures. We're going to document actual recovery time and endpoint objectives. We're going to look at your network and make sure that they're accurately backing up critical files. We're also going to review your plans for disaster recovery. And look at backups and make sure that you have sufficient capacity and that you're routinely backing up. So happy to do this. At the bottom of the screen is our account manager, Jay Yeager, who, if anyone wants to take advantage of this, just email Jay. It's down there at the bottom, jyeager@tagsolutions.com.
Thank you, Dave. So a couple of questions have come in. I want to answer some of those. Dave, the first one's for you. About how long does one of these assessments take, or how long does it take to kind of do all this stuff?
For us, it's probably about 4 hours. On the customer side, I'm going to say it's probably an hour, half hour up, maybe an hour and a half hour up front, and then an hour to, sit through the findings.
Awesome. No, that's really great. And when they talk about some of this stuff, at the very beginning, you talked about Tag Solutions offering managed services across the board for both cybersecurity as well as everything else. What are some of the offerings and some of the solutions that you offer around managed services when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Well, it's the whole suite of services, right? It's your backup, it's your Office 365. As I mentioned as we opened up, one of the things that we do for our clients is we help them build roadmaps. We find that most people, as we talk to them about their IT strategy, they don't have a roadmap that mirrors their business plans. So the question would be is, where is the business trying to go in 1, 3, and 5 years, and how is technology going to help them get there? So yeah, those are all basically there's a whole suite of things that we do on the managed services side to support people.
That's awesome. And that really showcases the Tag Solutions full availability to help you across this entire journey, because a lot of organizations, they're either just looking into this or they're just trying to start out, and some people don't know where to begin, and some people know where to begin but know that they don't have the free availability or the time to be able to do some of this stuff, and that's really where this partnership with Tag can really help them. So Dave, thank you so much. So with that, I know we're a little early, so we're going to give some people a little bit of time back. I want to thank everybody on behalf of Tag Solutions and iland for this discussion. Please, if you weren't able to visit and see the comprehensive data protection solution that we did last time, check it out on the Tag Solutions blog. Sign up for the Infrastructure as a Service cloud-based accelerate your IT initiatives for October. If there's any more questions, I can hang out for a couple more minutes. It doesn't seem like anybody else had any questions. Dave, thank you so much for having us. We look forward to the conversations that we all have together and helping your customers become IT resilient and successful in everything that they try to do.
Well, thank you. This was great. I hope people enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, I don't see any more questions. So with that, again, have a wonderful afternoon, wonderful week, stay safe, and we shall talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.